She nodded, but inside, she was battling a whirlwind of thoughts. She kept thinking about Sandra and the way Ashton had looked at her earlier. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make her wonder if something was changing between them. They spent the next few minutes practicing, but Dealey was no longer entirely focused on the game. Her mind kept drifting back to that moment, the heat, the closeness, the way Ashton's eyes had lingered on her lips. Was he feeling what she was feeling? A few moments later, Ashton finished his round of swings, placing his club back in the bag. "You ready to grab some food?" he asked. His casual tone didn't match the tension Dealey was feeling. She tried to force a smile. "Sure," she replied. But then she remembered Sandra's offer. "Don't you have plans with her?" she blurted out before she could stop herself. Ashton raised an eyebrow. "Who?" "Sandra," she said, trying to sound casual even though her heart was pounding. "Oh, her," he said, rolling his eyes. "I told her maybe, but I'm not interested. I've got you today. I've been waiting for this, so I'm not letting anything get in the way." Deli felt a surge of relief, but there was still a part of her that was unsure. Was he just saying that to make her feel better? Or was he being genuine? They walked together toward the parking lot, and Deli could feel his arm brush against hers as they strolled side by side. She was hyper-aware of the space between them, the way her heart seemed to beat faster every time he glanced at her. As they climbed into his car, Deli noticed how effortlessly they fell into conversation. Dinner was just the two of them, no distractions, no pretenses. They laughed, joked, and even reminisced about the old times before everything had gotten complicated. It felt good to be in that space with him again. By the time dinner turned into drinks, Dealey could feel the alcohol loosening her tongue. And before she knew it, they were in a car, heading back to his place. The night had been perfect in its simplicity. No drama, no awkwardness, just them enjoying each other's company like they always had. "Should we watch a movie?" she asked from the back seat, her voice a little quieter than usual. Ashton turned toward her, his expression unreadable in the dim light. "Yeah, but I get to pick," he said with a smirk. "You're going to love it. I want to see you jump out of your seat in fear." "I'm talking full-on scared, Deli." Dealey laughed, a little nervous. "Only if you promise to protect me," she said, not even realizing how suggestive it sounded until it left her mouth. But Ashton didn't seem to mind. "You know I always will," he said, his voice low and serious. "And I always will." Dealey couldn't believe it. "I might even jump into your arms if I get too scared," she added without thinking. He winked at her, his expression full of confidence. "Not to worry. I'll catch you." Dealey had to force herself not to melt right there in her seat, though a part of her secretly wished she could test that theory. If she got scared enough, she wouldn't mind jumping right into his arms. As they pulled into his driveway, she tried to push aside the images of what might happen next. She knew that whatever it was, she couldn't afford to overthink it. But if this was how the night was going to go, she wasn't sure how much longer she could keep her feelings in check. Ashton could hardly believe the thrill he felt when Deli practically flew into his arms during their Saturday night movie marathon. The scene in The Grudge, where the ghost crawled down the stairs backward with contorted limbs, had done it. So had the one where the kid's face suddenly appeared from under the bed. Deli had jumped from her seat both times, nearly landing in his lap. It made him laugh to himself as he walked through the hall, whistling, feeling lighter than usual. Having Dealey stay with him had brought an unexpected energy to his life. It was like a new, exciting element had been added to his routine. He wasn't coming home to an empty apartment anymore. He woke up to the smell of fresh coffee brewing. Sometimes there were little notes left for him on the bathroom mirror, the kitchen counter, or even the front door. He never knew when she'd be there, curled up on the couch with takeout or popcorn, or which movie she'd picked. It was a welcome change, and maybe, he realized, it was more of a change than he had initially realized he needed. He slid his key into the lock and turned it, ready to greet her with a playful "Honey, I'm home." But when the door opened, he was met with his usual emptiness. Dealey must have been working late. He shrugged off the momentary disappointment and went to grab a beer from the fridge. As he twisted the cap off, he heard the jingle of keys at the front door. A wave of happiness rushed over him as Deli came in, arms full, dripping wet from the rain. "Is it raining out?" Ashton asked, trying to hide his amusement. She looked at him, raising an eyebrow, then glanced down at her soaked clothes. "No, not raining. I just decided to run through a bursting fire hydrant for fun." He blinked, staring at her. "Yes, Ashton. It's raining." He chuckled. "Hey, Yoda, I'm not here to judge. Maybe running through fire hydrants is your thing." Dealey snorted and dropped the scowl. "Ah. So you did read the other Star Wars note. Good." Ashton grinned. "Uh-huh. We love that movie. Well, all of them. Daly nodded, and as she began to take off her wet clothes, Ashton couldn't help but notice the gracefulness in her movements. She pulled off her drenched sweater, raising her arms, and he caught a flash of her bare waist and the black lace of her bra. He quickly looked away, trying to maintain his composure. That fleeting image lingered in his mind as he mentally reprimanded himself. Daly had no idea just how stunning she truly was. Her eyes met his, and for a moment it felt like she knew exactly what was on his mind. But there was no way of telling for sure. Okay, well, I was about to go out for dinner, Ashton said, trying to get the conversation back on track. But if it's pouring outside, maybe staying in is a good idea. Chinese? Thai? Or maybe Indian? Daly tilted her head, her lips curling into a knowing smile. Oh, yeah. Ashton's just a regular old homebody. Always has been. I vote Indian, Ashton said, pointing at the menu as a distraction. Fine, she sang as she breezed past him toward her room. Please order for me. Whatever you like. I'm going to get my things put away and change into some dry clothes. Her bedroom door clicked shut, and Ashton couldn't shake the frustration building in him as his thoughts drifted toward her changing behind that door. Why was he feeling like this? The attraction that had been growing steadily since she started staying with him was undeniable, and it was starting to feel a little overwhelming. Maybe it was the way she'd looked at the driving range, or maybe it was the closeness that had developed between them since she'd moved in. Either way, he couldn't ignore how it was starting to get to him. He dialed the Indian restaurant, placing their order. When he hung up, a couple of texts came through, one from a brunette he'd met at a coffee shop, and the other from Nadine. But as he stood there, staring out at the rain pounding against the window, his mind kept drifting back to Deli behind the bedroom door. He couldn't explain why, but he knew the decision was clear. Deli appeared, stepping out of her room, and Ashton froze. She was wearing tiny lounge shorts and a tight-fitting spaghetti-strapped top. His eyes briefly lingered on her figure before she shifted, crossing her arms over her chest. Oh, it's actually pretty chilly in here, she said, retreating back to her room. Ashton kicked himself for staring. He'd made things awkward by looking too long. She was just trying to relax, and he needed to stop letting his thoughts run wild. Still, that image of her lingered in his mind. She returned a few minutes later, in a big baggy hoodie, and the tension in the room seemed to settle. Ashton felt a slight relief, but his mind still couldn't shake the memory of how she'd looked earlier. Everything okay? She asked, raising an eyebrow as she sat on the couch. Yeah, of course, he said, trying to act normal. Just thinking about how comfy you look. I should get changed, too. He stood up to head to his bedroom, but then paused. Oh, and Deli? Yeah? She was sitting on the couch, her legs tucked beneath her. I had a really good time with you on Saturday, Ashton said. The driving range, dinner, drinks, all of it. I'm really glad we're spending time together. Daly looked at him for a moment, her expression unreadable, before responding softly. Me too. An hour later, they were snuggled up on the couch, watching some ridiculous show that Daly had convinced him to watch. Their feet were propped up on the coffee table, and their laps were filled with styrofoam boxes of food. Daly laughed as she dipped some naan into her curry. No, you see, she wants to be with him, but her career is more important. Sometimes you can love somebody, but it's still just not meant to be. Ashton shook his head, still amazed at how she could enjoy stuff like this. I don't know how you do it. You're too smart for this. Daly rolled her eyes. Whatever. Anybody could do what I do if they studied enough. I doubt that, he replied with a half smile. Anyway, that's exactly why I need mindless TV like this. It helps me unwind at the end of the day. If I get into NYU, I'll be working on my PhD every night, and I won't have time for fun. I like to think it's not if, but when you get in, Ashton said. Deli scrunched her nose, holding up two crossed fingers, still chewing. Even that was cute. Her hair was pulled into a loose bun, a few strands falling out, and she wore pink, fuzzy socks. She looked more beautiful in sweatpants than most girls did in formal attire. Well, surely you get choosing work over love, right? She asked. Ashton leaned back against the couch, considering her question. I'd say I tried to divide my time between the two, he replied with a smirk. But it's more about sex than love these days. Daly took another bite, her eyes glued to the TV. I work too much to meet anybody. And if I get into NYU, well, I'll be too busy for a relationship. No point starting something now. Ashton stared at her, trying to focus on the ridiculous TV show, but unable to tear his thoughts away from their conversation. Something about Daly was making him ask more questions than he ever had before. She was the only female friend he'd never slept with, and it made him even more curious. "You're into guys, right?" he asked, unsure of why he was so intrigued. She turned to him with a raised eyebrow. "Why?" Ashton hesitated. He wasn't sure why, but he couldn't help it. "I don't know. Just curious, I guess." She stared at him for a moment before shaking her head. "Yeah, I'm into guys." He nodded, but his mind was still spinning. What was going on with him? Deli's eyes widened for a moment. Then she laughed, smacking Ashton's arm lightly. "You're so clueless, Ashton. Only someone like you could ask such a ridiculous question." "I'm into guys, not girls," she said, shaking her head. Ashton couldn't help but laugh, though his curiosity persisted. "So how long has it been?" "Excuse me? You know, since you've been with a guy?" She kicked his feet off the coffee table, slamming her empty takeout box down. "Ashton, really? That's none of your business." For a moment, Ashton thought she might be embarrassed, but the grin she was trying to hide told him otherwise. "You're totally thinking of someone, aren't you?" "I can tell," he said with a smirk. "Who was it, the last guy?" "Really?" She laughed. "You call him a gentleman?" "That's hilarious. You can keep your curiosity to yourself." "Well, if you're being honest, I'm just as open as you." "And I'm just wondering," he said with a grin. "Besides, we all have our own ways of dealing with things." She rolled her eyes. "I guess if you must know, I'm a virgin." Ashton blinked in surprise, feeling an unfamiliar pang in his chest. "Wait, really? You've never had a serious boyfriend?" "I did, but it didn't work out," she shrugged, sounding casual. "We met a few months ago through Tinder. We got along, but neither of us felt a real connection. It was just convenient. But he lives far away, and we both got busy with our work." Ashton was still processing this when he heard himself ask, "So, you've never slept with him?" She let out a small, knowing laugh. "No, not once. We do keep in touch though, but it's mostly through phone calls. Nothing too serious." "Like phone dates?" Ashton raised an eyebrow, his curiosity getting the better of him. "Something like that. Just, some casual chats when we're both free. It's a little less spontaneous than what you have going on." Ashton had to admit, the whole thing felt odd to him, but he appreciated her honesty. He leaned back, still thinking about what she said. It wasn't a big deal, but for some reason, it had his mind racing. "So, does he say anything? Interesting?" he asked before he could stop himself. Deli shot him a quick glance. "Ashton, too far. You can't ask me that." "I'm just curious," he shrugged. "Well, sometimes," she said, "but it's nothing you'd need to worry about." Ashton tried to focus on something else, but his mind kept drifting back to her words. Why did it bug him so much? He was supposed to be relaxed, but something about it didn't sit right. "So, what's his name again?" he asked. Deli seemed a little uncomfortable. "His name's Frank. He's a doctor. And he's actually very nice, but we just don't click in the way you're probably imagining." "A doctor?" "Huh. You could do better," Ashton said, although he wasn't sure why he said it. She raised an eyebrow. "Really? You think so?" "Well, your track record isn't exactly impressive either." "I've had my share of relationships," he frowned. "But it's different. I don't settle down easily." He cut himself off, unsure how to explain why this was bothering him. Deli sighed, handing him her phone with Frank's picture on it. "Here, take a look. He's been a decent enough guy. Nothing special, but nice enough." Ashton glanced at the picture of Frank, the tan guy with a muscular build. He was smiling, and from what Ashton could tell, he seemed pretty standard for someone who spent his life in the gym. But there was something about him Ashton didn't like. Maybe it was the way he looked so perfect, or maybe Ashton just didn't want to feel like he was the kind of guy Deli deserved. "He's, not my type," Ashton said dismissively, handing the phone back. Deli just laughed. "Of course not. But that's kind of my point. We all have our types, don't we?" Ashton bit his lip, still feeling strangely uneasy. He wasn't sure if he was being protective or just overthinking the whole thing, but he couldn't stop feeling like something was off. He kicked his feet up on the coffee table, trying to relax. "Does he, I don't know, send you gifts or anything like that?" Deli rolled her eyes. "No, Ashton. He's not the gift-sending type, but he's reliable when I need someone to talk to." "I get that. I'm just saying, you deserve someone better," Ashton said, not sure if he was reassuring her or just trying to convince himself. She eyed him for a moment, the playful grin fading slightly. "Thanks, but it's complicated. I'm not ready to get involved with anyone just yet." Ashton nodded, feeling a strange mix of relief and frustration. He didn't know what it was about Frank that bothered him. He had no right to feel that way about someone else's love life, but for some reason, he couldn't stop thinking about it. "Well, if you ever change your mind, I'll be around," Ashton said, offering a casual smile. She smirked, leaning back on the couch. "You're funny, but don't hold your breath. I'm just fine with how things are." Ashton wasn't sure if he believed her, but for now, it felt like enough. At least she was honest with him, even if he didn't totally understand where she was coming from. Dealey had to admit, Ashton had been right about needing to lift the veil of awkwardness that had been hanging over them. For some reason, though, it felt like the veil had been lifted just a little too much. Their new routine of spending nights in, watching movies together, and going out for dinner or drinks had slowly started to change how she saw them. It was easy to get caught up in the simplicity of it all. The lines between what they were and what they could be were blurring. They weren't really a couple, she reminded herself, just two people who got along. Sure, they hadn't kissed, and they definitely hadn't crossed any other physical lines. But the ease of everything, the comfort they shared, was starting to feel more like a relationship. That was the strange part. But despite all that, she wasn't ready for any of it to change. She wasn't in a rush to redefine what this was. After all, who needed a label when things were this simple? Still, there had been that night on the couch, the one where Ashton had asked a ton of questions about her almost non-existent sex life. He'd barely even blinked before diving into subjects that were a little too personal, only to freeze up the second she gave him any actual answers. It was strange, to say the least, but she wasn't about to dwell on it. She had more important things to focus on, like enjoying a peaceful weekend. She had just gotten home from work when she saw Ashton sitting at the dining table, his elbows propped up and a pile of mail scattered in front of him. But the thing that stood out was the bottle of champagne sitting next to two glasses. "What's going on here?" she asked, walking over to him. Ashton grinned mischievously. "You got a letter from NYU." Dealey's stomach flipped. "Oh, my God." A wave of nervousness washed over her, making it hard to even move. She slowly walked over, eyeing the NYU stamped envelope as if it could hold her future in it. She knew this moment could change everything, and she couldn't quite decide if she was ready for it. He slid the letter toward her. "I already got the champagne ready. But if it's not the letter I'm hoping for, there's always bourbon. Just let me know what you're in the mood for after you open it." Daly nodded, swallowing down her nerves as she gingerly pulled at the corner of the envelope. It felt like she was about to open Pandora's box, except it wasn't a box, it was a letter. "I can't do it," she admitted, her voice faltering. "You have to open it for me." Ashton lifted an eyebrow. "You sure about that?" She nodded, not trusting herself to do it. She waited while he carefully tore into the envelope. He unfolded the letter and skimmed through it, his eyes moving rapidly. His expression was unreadable, and the seconds seemed to stretch on forever. "Say it," Dealey thought. "Please say it." And then finally, a huge grin broke across his face. "I don't know about you, but I'm not surprised." "Dilly, you got in." Dilly's heart skipped a beat. "What? Are you sure?" Ashton turned the letter toward her, showing her the confirmation. "I'm positive." "You did it, kid." She couldn't contain her excitement. The chair behind her tipped over as she leapt to her feet, and she immediately started jumping up and down, screaming with joy. Ashton stood and popped the bottle of champagne. But before she could even process what was happening, she found herself in his arms, wrapped tightly around his neck in a hug. The excitement was overwhelming, and for a second she forgot everything. She was just floating on this cloud of pure happiness. Ashton didn't seem to mind. He held her close, and at one point, she felt herself being lifted as if she weighed nothing. His strength surprised her. He was so solid and the muscles in his arms felt like steel. In that moment, everything seemed to pause. Time slowed down, and Dealey stared into his eyes, her heart racing. It was as if everything was aligned in that one perfect second. Gratitude, joy, and affection all mixed together, and without thinking, her lips found his. The kiss was soft at first, but then it deepened, both of them leaning into it. Dealey's mind was racing. Sirens went off in her head. "What are you doing, Deli?" "You're kissing Ashton Patterson's." "No, this is wrong." But his lips were warm, and there was a tenderness there that made it impossible to pull away. His kiss was a perfect balance of gentle and firm, something she hadn't expected. She quickly realized what she'd done. Her heart nearly stopped in her chest. She had kissed him. Ashton, her friend, the guy she had no business kissing. This was wrong, right? A mistake? A mess? Before she could process it any further, she broke away, pulling herself out of his arms, her fingers gently grazing her lips. She couldn't look him in the eye. What had just happened? Had he felt it too? Sorry, I shouldn't have, she started to stammer, but he stopped her with a gentle wave of his hand. All good, he said casually. He didn't seem upset at all, just calm. Dealey blinked at him, feeling a little dizzy from the whole situation. What now? Go change, he said with an easy grin, as if nothing had happened. No biggie. We're going out to celebrate. But you already opened the champagne, Dealey reminded him, wanting to avoid talking about the kiss. And I still need to shower. Take your time, he said, pouring a glass of champagne and holding it out to her. Drink while you get ready. I'll be here. She smiled at him, not sure whether to laugh or apologize again, and walked to her room, her mind racing. What just happened? She couldn't make sense of it. The kiss, the way he held her, the way her body reacted to him. Had he been surprised too? Or was she just reading too much into it? Once in her room, Dealey grabbed her phone and sent a text to her dad and Zoe. She needed to share the news she had gotten into NYU. Of course, her dad immediately responded with excitement, demanding she come over for dinner as soon as possible. She grinned to herself, tossing her phone aside for a moment. Tonight was hers, though, she thought. Tonight was about her and Ashton. She knew exactly what she was going to wear. There was a red dress she had been saving for a special occasion, an occasion she hadn't even known was coming. She slipped it on, feeling the fabric hug her body in all the right ways. It was short, a little too daring for her usual taste, but tonight it felt right. She took a deep breath and looked at herself in the mirror. She was about to officially become a PhD candidate before she turned 30, and she had just kissed Ashton Patterson's. Life was weird and complicated. But, God, did she feel alive. After a quick shower, Dealey dried off and slipped into the dress. She left her hair down, letting it flow over her shoulders in soft waves. A quick swipe of makeup, and she was ready. Her phone buzzed with a message from Zoe. Yeah, says, girl. Get it. But also WHAT. Your ass better call me later. Or better yet, tell me all about it, INPERSON tomorrow when I land. Dealey chuckled and quickly snapped a selfie in the dress, making sure to pout her lips just right. She sent it to Zoe, along with a message. Just thought you'd like to see how I'm celebrating my acceptance letter. Ashton's taking me out. Oh, you do? We kissed. P.S. Don't get excited. It was an accident. Talk to you later. She quickly switched her purse for a smaller one and rushed out of her room. She needed a moment to breathe and focus. As her hand reached for the doorknob, her phone lit up with a message from Zoe. Girl, you better tell me everything.